All right, traders, good afternoon. This is Christian from Hertz Tropica Trade Group, and this is your end of week recap for Friday, June 26th. And, well, tough to really be somewhat or super positive watching the price action today. So, it's one of those things where I hate to say it, but because I feel like I say the same things over and over in terms of managing your risk, but when we start to see the market change personalities, the best thing in my view to do is to basically just lighten up your risk. I always kind of tell you what I'm doing and how I trade and so forth. I'm mostly on the long side. I do use hedges, but I'm mostly playing the long side. I get that question every once in a while, but the markets do go up over time. I'm also more of an optimistic person, so I generally like to look for good, nice stories that are going on in the market. And it's really tough to play things on the short side. I used to play things on the short side, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I was really heavy playing things like the energy companies when oil went down, like the first time that it really went down a few years back. But I remember I was basically running like a book that was like 50-50 long versus short. Now I'm basically, considering that the market has kind of changed a lot, and I think the market was moving sideways for a little while back then. But, I'm mainly play things to the long side. I just have learned over the years that it's a little bit easier than trying to flip flop between long and short all the time. And then I use hedges, right? When I think that the market is losing momentum or when there's a turn that's going to happen in the market. But, and that kind of keeps me, for me, it's too hard to kind of flip back and forth between short and long and so forth. So that's the style that I've adopted over the last few years, and it's worked pretty well for me. So that said, with my mindset like that, and once I see that the market is changing its personality a little bit, what I try to do is just basically really pay attention to where my risk is in the market. And I try, not always to 100% success, but I really try to kind of watch the market and as it changes, be pretty objective about it and try not to force trades into the wrong side of the market, lower my position size, lower my quantity of positions. But that said, I had a down day today. I was all happy yesterday. I thought that I really reduced my risk decently, but I got caught in a couple things today. So it is what it is. Russell rebalance. We're going to talk about that too. But again, I'm not super positive in this video, so it's 3 minutes into the video. If you don't want to end the week on a super negative, or if you don't want to hear any more negatives, then you can turn the video off. That's fine. I'll try to keep it light, but yeah, so you can see what's going on here for the day, and then we'll talk about this week's performance. But clearly, the Russell rebalance. I mean, there were some whippy moves. I'll tell you, I was trying to find some things that had the opposite move, to the upside. But just to look at like a couple of the things that I saw. I mean, look at this Lam Research, moved about $10. A name that was actually acting pretty well. But here's just an example of like how the Russell rebalances messes things around. I mean, look at Apple whip around. Apple was up to almost 358 and fell back down. I mean, Apple's a big stock, so it takes a lot of volume to really move that around decently. AMD was another casualty. I don't own any AMD, but look at that. I mean, a dollar move. That's we don't really normally see that too often, but that's Russell rebalance. And then I try to look for some things that did well. Twilio held up well, but you could see even Shopify, right, got smoked there at the end of the day too. So it's really tough with the Russell rebalance. Some traders ask me like, hey, what do you do, Russell rebalance? Like, what's the trade? Or it's basically just stay out of the way kind of thing. Because if you're caught in a couple of these things that move around like this at the end of the day, it could be pretty painful for you. So that's kind of the story there with the Russell rebalance. But let's talk about the S&P chart for a minute, because we talked about this. I did a midday video. I won't rehash the whole midday video, but I was talking about the little bit of a personality change in the S&P, especially on this 1 hour chart, which I always find so useful. But remember on, I think it was Tuesday, Tuesday we rallied all overnight session, and we basically got into the, yeah, this was Tuesday. We basically got into the open, and the market just hung here, and then at the end of the day, like, failed. And I thought that was really tricky too, because it's not like the market even was doing anything during the cash open. It was just sitting there, and then basically, turned lower at the end of the day. So that's kind of made it tricky, because I know a lot of traders, especially day traders, they don't like to hold any overnight risk. And if you didn't hold any overnight risk, then you missed a lot of the rally in the beginning of the week, because that's where the moves took place. So, and then on Wednesday, we sliced through the value area, no problem whatsoever, going through that. And then yesterday we rallied at the end of the day, but as I said in yesterday's video, we rallied right into resistance. And then we kind of held there. The market tried to rally a couple times in the overnight session, but could not get through 3077. That is a tell to me, when we see something like that. And the market, and then as soon as we opened, that was pretty much it. We backed away from that level, and we took out that whole bounce from yesterday, whatever that was about. I guess just a buy program that went through. And then, it got a little bit dicey there at the end of the day. And I'm surprised, because I even hedged. Like, I even said, okay, if we break this low, I don't see a lot of support back here. We were holding this Venom line pretty decently. It did a good job at doing, at kind of holding in there. These Venom lines are not major support. I call them speed bumps. But we really don't have a lot of support. That's why I put some hedges on, because, the next place down, you got the 200-day moving average, which some technicians will be looking at. For me, what's even more important than the 200-day moving average is top of value, 29.51. And for the week, we're kind of doing this backwards. Usually you want to start with the weekly chart first, but we're basically, this is the first close back inside value. Remember, we did this a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, where we had this nice kick save, where we held, and then the following week we rallied, but we've definitely stalled out here. And this is it's the first close back inside value. So that's not pretty. So like I said, not a lot of positive things. Interesting what happened to the FANG stocks today. And again, I'm surprised that the market was only down 2.1%, because the FANG stocks are the biggest weights, regardless of how many upgrades Amazon gets. It finally kind of gave way. This was down 2.2% for the day. Ugly price action. Of course, Facebook has a bunch of political stuff going on too. Nobody wants to advertise there anymore. Down 8.3%. Remember, and all those calls that people have been buying. Right? So again, you have to be careful with that call activity, because again, the people who are true believers of call activity, they won't ever tell you that there's a loser. Well, there was a lot of positioning. And this, I've been talking about how a lot of the option activity has been really like the momentum stuff, like weeklies and really short-term calls, which to me doesn't mean that anybody's doing any really positioning. They're basically just playing momentum. But in something like Facebook, go back and look through people's feeds. People have been talking about, and I've seen a lot of call positioning, like going out a few months, like September. A lot of accumulation in calls. So the reason why I point this out is because if you are trading a lot of this call activity, I think you really have to be careful, because number one, all these guys who tout all this call activity, they never talk about something that doesn't work. They never do. They just won't ever mention that the calls went up. They'll retweet the winners, right? So you could go look through some of these guys' feeds who tweet about like 20 symbols a day. They'll talk about the 3 or 4 over and over that one, but the 17 others that they were touting, it's like they never happened, even though some of them they talked about repetitively. And the reason why is because half of them don't even trade. They don't. They don't show you their P&L. They don't show you anything. They don't. I don't think most of them trade. I think they're just trying to basically pump stuff for trading rooms, which, you know, I understand. I run a trading room too. I just don't do that type of thing. I'm as honest with people as I can be about this stuff. It's basically you can use it. This is my take on option activity. It can give you some trade ideas, and it's really good for short-term momentum for like day trading. But that's where it kind of ends from there because a lot of this stuff it's 50-50 if you hold it for a swing trade. So that's Facebook. Even Netflix, which just kind of shows you. Let's see what Netflix big ugly candle there too, after breaking outside of value. Google was another one too. Google went down 5.5%. There was call positioning yesterday in Google. GOOG. Again, nothing big. I think they were. What I saw yesterday was next week's calls. So again, what? And the other thing is, which people don't tell you too, is when the market is going up, every call works, right? Every momentum call buy and so forth. When the market goes up, it works. When the market goes down, all of them don't. There's a big tendency that most of them don't work either. So it just happens that when the market goes up, the call activity works too. So you have to keep that in mind too. So that's one rant. What else can it? So interesting with all these FANG stocks down this much. Again, I'm surprised. It's a little bit because I don't see that many things countering that. So when you look at, for example, the Qs, right? Usually when names go down, there's other names that go up. But I didn't see a lot of names. These are smaller names too that are in here. The ones that went down are your bigger weights. So again, I'm surprised. Where did the Qs finish for the day? Down 2.3. I mean, I would think that the Qs would be down like 3.5%, but I guess you do have some names that were green today that balanced it out. You only have 100 names in here. Docu was up 5, so there's one. But it didn't look like it was like a fear. Well, this name I think was added to the Russell today, right? I believe so. But this one, real nice performance. If you had all your marbles in this one, congratulations to you. Twilio, I think I already mentioned Twilio acted really well. Up decently. So where does this leave us? Well, one of the things that I saw. I was looking. I tend to look at credit spreads at least like once a week. So this is starting to tick up. That's not the best sign. We've kind of watched this for the last few weeks and said, okay, it's kind of hanging out around the lows, still heightened, but now we're starting to see this tick up. And part of this is because bonds were up so much. The government bonds were up so much today, and getting very close. Some people were talking to me saying, "Oh, this has already triggered a buy signal." I do use value areas, so we're basically have gone all the way through full green bar on the bonds. So that does look a bit bullish for bonds here. One thing I've noticed too is there really hasn't been that much positioning in the bond futures. They're pretty. I put a chart out on Twitter last weekend talking about like 10-year bond futures, and there's not a lot of positioning both by the speculators and commercial players. So we'll see if that changes this week. So what else? Again, I've talked so much about COVID, and I don't want to end on a really bad note this weekend, but it's definitely concerning, right? We've talked about for a while that I got hounded a couple weeks. Maybe was it last week or the week before? And I finally just said, and I have to find the tweet from last week, but everybody was getting mad at me on Twitter for tweeting about the coronavirus cases going higher. And people were telling me, well, the deaths aren't going up and the hospitalizations aren't going up. And I try to tell people, well, there is a lag. And I said this in yesterday's video, but you get sick, right? You don't go right to the hospital. You get sick, you don't die right away from COVID. But now that those numbers are definitely, the hospitalizations are ticking up higher, and that's the lag is now hitting. And now we're just starting to see, I believe, in some data that deaths are starting to go up. So this is going to be really interesting how this plays out. I do think it's at this point, it's kind of embarrassing for us as a nation. You know, if you're from the U.S., you look at all these other places, Europe and Canada too. They're not, they're done with this. It's basically now they're going to probably have different bouts of it. Same thing with a lot of the Asia countries too. This thing is going to crop up again. It's not over for any of these places. So I shouldn't say that, but I think this is a thing that's going to stick with us. And you know, people are fighting about, rather than people like uniting and saying, yeah, we need to really defeat this thing. People are arguing. Oh, this number's not right. I mean, it's kind of disgusting. We need to get together and solve this issue. And the reason why I talk about this so much in these videos is because we're already, the United States is already like, we're down. Like, the markets have rallied on optimism that economic activity is going to pick up and so forth. And we were on a nice trajectory till about a couple weeks ago. But if these cases, and which they are, we're starting to hear state by state, they're going to have to shut things down, right? We've heard Mnuchin and we've heard Kudlow say, oh, well, we're not shutting down the country again nationally. But they're not in control of the states. And as states get more and more cases, we're seeing it. Florida said they're taking a step back. They're shutting down bars. Again, I don't know why this is a political thing, but the governor said he's not mandating mask wearing. But yet they're going to shut down this. It boggles the mind that this has gotten to be some type of a political thing. No other country, especially developed country, has had issues like this. What is wrong with us? That we're arguing about wearing face masks. What does it take? More companies to go out of business? Like in your personal town, maybe if all the mom and pop shops have to close for good, will that make you change your mind? Because the governors are now saying it. They're saying, hey, we're going to have to shut this and shut that and postpone this and postpone that. So I don't. So that's why, again, I said I was going to try not to be negative, but we're just headed down and again, I like to be optimistic, and that's why it frustrates me, because I want this stuff to be over. And I was listening to Portnoy, the Barstool Sports guy, because he is entertaining at the end of the day, and he said, hey, he I don't know where he's at, but he's saying that he was out, and all the kids, like, nobody's wearing masks anymore. And I get it. The kids have a better, people under 30, so I'm associating as kids because I'm not under 30 anymore, have a better rate of survival. But this thing is so contagious. You spread it to the elders, you're gonna wipe out our, So anyway, I'll get off the negative tangent, but I'm concerned, So you kind of have to take it for what it is, and now we're seeing things like credit spreads move higher. Here's the Texas number out, which these states, they put out these numbers at different points, but I don't know. It's concerning that these states don't have a handle on the problem, and where is this going to go to? I don't know. So, all right. So, what a horrible way to end the weekend video. So, what that means, all this stuff to me, with all this uncertainty kind of creeping back into the market, I am concerned about the software group, because you saw what happened to the internet group today. The FANG stocks. Could this happen to the software group? Like, once we get to, like, I've talked about market breadth a lot this week, and as long as the overall market is kind of in decent shape. There's going to be, with this coronavirus upon us, and the haves versus the have-nots, there's some groups that can outperform, but if everybody is flocking to all the software names, what happens is they get overcrowded. And I think we're at the point where these things are getting pretty overcrowded, that I'm concerned that, because, and again, some of these things, like TTD acted, wow, I guess it actually came in, but it was acting well. But again, like some of these names, they're just up a lot. And when I see things up so much, profit takers do come in to say, hey, at some point, I'm going to take some money off the table. And once they do that, and if it's an overcrowded long, then people say, oh, geez, this thing's pulling back. I'm going to unwind my long. I'm going to unwind my long. So be careful, in my opinion. And again, everything I'm talking about is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. But I would be careful with this group at this point because it is so overcrowded. Again, it doesn't mean you have to unwind everything, but I would be careful if you are hiding out in a bunch of these names, because it's not pretty when this group comes in. We've seen that before. We haven't seen it for a while, in months. So be on alert for that. And there's things that you could do. You could buy IGV puts, right? So kind of, if you're going to stay long this group, the software group, when you put an alert on this, and when you see it break, buy some puts in, in one of the software ETFs, or just the Qs in general, because that's also, I would call it, overcrowded. All right, so that's my thoughts. And again, the reason why I go through all this is because, again, I'm always worried about my risk first, and my goal in assessing all this is to make money at the end of the day, and to, that's the whole game for me, right? Is to make sure that I'm finding good setups for the trading room, and that I'm trading appropriately, and I'm adjusting to what the market is giving me, right? Because it's a fun party when everything's going up and when the market is trending, but when it changes, you have to make some adjustments along the way. All right, we'll leave it there. Have a great weekend, everybody. I promise to be more positive next week. See ya.